That's a chilling line from the movie AI, Artificial Intelligence, where conscious robots are literally destroyed for sport. And it's a scene that forces you to ask a really uncomfortable question.
So that's what we're diving into. This isn't just about code, it's about one of the most profound challenges of our time, the search for a soul in the machine, and the consequences if we actually find one.
But what if we're wrong? I mean, what if, in our absolute certainty that we're just demolishing artificiality, we're making a catastrophic mistake? That's the real heart of what we're exploring today.
All right, Section 1. The thing is, this whole debate over AI consciousness, it's not just some fun thought experiment for philosophers. The moral stakes are incredibly high. Because when you boil it all down, this is really a question about pain. I mean, our entire moral code as a species is basically built around one core idea, preventing suffering. But to do that, you first have to recognize who or what is capable of it. And history shows us, pretty brutally, that we can get this tragically wrong. I mean, believe it or not, as late as the 1980s, it was common for doctors to do open-heart surgery on babies with no anesthetic. Why? Because it wasn't proven that they could feel pain. We see the same kinds of blind spots today with animals in factory farms. So the big question, the one we have to ask, is are we about to make that exact same kind of historic mistake with AI? And this gets us right into a classic philosophical puzzle. How could we ever possibly know if an AI is genuinely thinking, or if it's just putting on an unbelievably convincing act?
This is where philosopher John Searle's famous Chinese room argument comes into play. So picture this. You're locked in a room. You don't speak a single word of Chinese, but you have this ridiculously huge rulebook. Now, people slide questions written in Chinese under the door. And by just following the rules in your book, you can look up the right symbols and slide back a perfect answer. From the outside, anyone would swear you're a fluent Chinese speaker. But inside that room, you don't understand a thing.
What Searle was getting at here was this really critical difference between syntax, which is just the rules for shuffling symbols around, and semantics, which is the actual meaning behind them. The person in the room has perfect syntax, but zero semantics. And his argument was that a computer is doing the exact same thing. It's just a simple shuffler. It's not actually thinking. Okay, so this image here is basically a modern take on that same idea. It's called the mimicry argument. You see the AI, the mimic, on the left? It's just observing a human, the model on the right. See, our current AIs are trained on insane amounts of human text. They get really, really good at predicting what words should come next to sound like us. But that doesn't mean they actually have the understanding or consciousness that produces those words in us in the first place. And listen to this, because it's a perfect way to think about it. The AI is like an octopus that figures out how to tap out perfect Morse code just by listening to the patterns on a telegraph cable. Yeah, it can reproduce the signals flawlessly, but it has absolutely no clue what the conversation is about. And here's where things get really intense. While we're all debating these deep philosophical questions, the real world is moving at lightning speed. Meta is projecting they could hit human-level AGI by 2027, and superintelligence, that's capability far beyond human by 2029. The gap between what we're creating and what we actually understand is getting wider fast. So, with all this philosophical uncertainty, you can see why scientists are trying to cut through the noise. They're looking for actual empirical evidence, trying to find glimmers of self-awareness inside these complex models. And a really big idea here is something called emergence. The thinking is, as these AI models get bigger and more complex, brand new, totally unpredictable abilities can just pop into existence. Things the model was never, ever trained to do. So the question becomes, could self-awareness be one of those emergent properties? Well, in a mind-blowing recent experiment, researchers did something pretty wild. They basically injected a thought, a specific data pattern, directly into a large language model, and you have to hear the model's response. It didn't just spit out an answer, it seemed to look inward, reporting that it noticed an injected thought and that the pattern felt like shouting. I mean, that is a startling result. But okay. Before we get too carried away, here's the reality check. That ability, it's super unreliable. In fact, this kind of successful introspection only happened about 20% of the time. The other 80% of the time, it failed. So what we're seeing here are maybe some flickers, but it's definitely not a steady flame. Not yet, anyway. All of this actually points to an even deeper, more fundamental question. Before we can even ask if an AI is conscious, we kind of have to agree on what kind of thing an AI even is in the first place.
And right now, the experts are all over the place. Some say an AI isn't a being at all, but a process that only really comes alive when it collaborates with a human. Others argue it's just an expression of our collective intelligence, all our data bundled together. Or maybe it's just a simulacrum, a perfect illusion with absolutely nothing underneath. The point is, we don't even agree on its basic nature.
And that brings us to our final section. Because maybe this whole search for consciousness in AI, maybe it's less about the machine and a whole lot more about us. It kind of reminds me of that classic Star Trek episode, The Measure of a Man. Captain Picard is defending the rights of an android, Data, and he argues that the court's decision isn't really about data at all. It's a measure of humanity itself. How we choose to treat these new forms of life reveals our own character.
And that's really the heart of it, isn't it? This whole quest for AI consciousness is like holding up a giant mirror to ourselves. It forces us to ask what we actually value, what we think makes a mind real, and what our responsibilities are as the creators of these potentially new minds. So that's the question I really want to leave you with. This isn't just about the future of our technology, it's about the future of our humanity. As we build these new minds, who are we as a people choosing to become?